Sunday night, and I've been busy all day, and I've said it at 2 o'clock Sunday night.
That stinks.
I mean, I looked over all this stuff and went through all of that, yes.
Huh? She's not sure.
And that's what you're talking about, that we went over what.
When we did those workshops.
No, I was gonna shoot the city's ordinance and the extra sections.
If you got something, just bring it up, it'd be changed, cause it's not in print yet.
Right. So we'll see, but
I mean, this would be a good time to do it if you want to
Yeah.
go back and pick up
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Cause I don't
We had to
think
do
it's
those
fair.
up in Jonesboro where you
Things will take all long.
had to, certain materials and certain things you could do, certain things you couldn't do, kind of thing. Yeah.
Frank's coming.
I can hear him.
And the certificate of
He said
Yes.
Frank's on the city.
Oh, yes.
Hey, did you hear anything from Frank? When he's supposed to be here?
He sent me a text today that said he would be here.
Okay. All right.
Workshop too, or?
Yeah. Hang on, let me read, well, I'm not gonna read it to you because it had to do with other stuff. Let me double check it.
About 1 minute.
Huh?
Here comes Frank.
Ah.
The door back here. I got it, Eva. I'm right here.
Oh, he just coming?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So just give me the.
Listen, here he comes. Right on
Good,
time.
how are you?
Hey, sir.
How you doing?
Doing well. How about you?
Good.
Good to see you.
Get your chair and
Glad you made it.
Hey, buddy.
How's it going, friend?
You?
Hi, Bill.
Frank, how are you? Need a hand?
It is a winning lottery ticket number.
Fresh out. Sorry.
Okay, now that Mr. Harris is here, we'll go ahead, it's 5 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and call the Planning Commission special call meeting to review the Historic Property Preservation Ordinance to the meeting. So anyway, Miss Upchurch is out today. She is out of town, so I will be standing in for her in her absence. So hoping we can conduct this and move it along and do the best we can in her absence. But so with that, we do have a quorum here with our group, so we are now called to order. And the first item and only item for this meeting on the agenda is discussion of proposed text amendments to the Spalding County Code of Ordinances Appendix number 4, zoning, adding new Appendix P, Historic Property Preservations Ordinance. And with that, Mr. David, we'll let you go ahead and give us a
Okay,
brief rundown.
I guess just to clarify right off the bat, we are going to allow public comment if they so choose, or?
If y'all want to, sure.
Don't have any problem with that. Don't have a lot of people here, but we certainly will allow public comment. Do we have a sign-up sheet for public comment for this one? No?
We
Okay.
do not
All
on
right,
this
well,
one.
we'll just work that out. Let's go and give us a brief rundown on the
Given
basics
the
of it.
surge of attendance, Bruce, I don't think a sign-in sheet's likely necessary.
Right.
Did we have a notebook around?
You just use
I
that.
think we'll be okay. They said we'll be all right with this. Let's just go ahead and give us a brief rundown, and then we'll see if we have anybody who would like to speak, and then move from there.
All right, well, this has been in the works for several months. We, I believe in May or June, I forget which, postponed it in light of the fact that one of the main reasons was one of the proposed properties to be protected was part of a rezoning hearing, and they did not want that to conflict with each other on the same evening. So that particular property with the, I believe the Gaysert Home Place, as it's called, the rezoning for that was denied last week. So we've had a chance to resolve that for now, and now we have the ordinance in front of you again. We also proposed during that time to have a workshop where the affected property owners and other people could come discuss it and offer their input as well. So this is why we're having this now, and also having the item to be considered on the 6 p.m. Regular meeting. Has gone through a few changes based on input from the board over the past month or so. Those changes are outlined in red in your revised copy. One of the changes is reducing in section 107. This is where the main changes are. Originally requiring that a historically designated property shall preserve a 10-acre parcel around the existing principal building on the property. That's been reduced to 5 acres. Number 2, there should be a minimum 300 feet of horizontal distance from the side of the existing principal building to the side property lines. That's been now reduced to 200 feet instead of 300 feet. There are also some, in a section 109, there was added some general principles about construction standards, some more leeway given the property owners of these buildings in terms of repairs, additions, and renovations, making it basically similar looking materials rather than having to match an exact kind of wood or something from a historic time. So those are the main changes proposed as of right now, and they're, like I said, all in red in your revised ordinance. This is just focusing right now on the 3 nationally historically designated properties in Pike County. Spalding.
Okay.
Spalding County, not Pike County.
All right, well, we appreciate that, and I know there was some discussion and some adjustments made based on the, making it not quite as stringent on the replacement efforts there, and the fact that we know sometimes it is hard to find some of the old construction materials and things that they had. So in a lot of cases, we did kind of allow it to be, to look as much like that as possible and keep the appearance, but, could make some adjustments with that when necessary if there wasn't existing materials like what was originally utilized. So I know that was one of the things that had come up. I think, as a matter of fact, Ms. Upchurch had pointed that one out based on some concerns and issues she had previously up around the Atlanta area with some of these things. Now, so with that and kind of laying this out again, we do feel that having nice historic buildings, and just like with other facilities and buildings on the historic register, that that they be protected. And usually when you go in and start working on or renovating and doing things with these historic buildings, there are guidelines out there that you have to kind of go by. We're just kind of trying to reiterate that and put that in place within our ordinances, and to try to be consistent and try to make it work for everybody and keep good looking old facilities out there within our community. So with that being said, anything else you all would like to add from up here before we see if we have anybody wants some public comment?
I'd just like to hear if there is any comments
Okay.
before I make any.
Bruce,
Yes, sir.
I have taken David's draft,
Okay.
which pertains to the National Register properties,
Mm-hmm.
and looked at it from the perspective of what your role is prospectively on properties that may not be on the register, but that have historic significance. So if y'all will allow me, again, this is a supplement to what David's done, though it is, I think, important before anything is adopted. So I want to pass out some stuff to you. There should be enough for the board, and the first is the DNR ordinance dealing with historic preservation. The second is the city's ordinance.
Thank you.
Oh, good, I get one back, thank you. You want one?
Thank you.
Guys, do y'all want? All right, give it. All right. Then I have taken an outline form and supplemented additional sections to go into a draft that David's done. Again, this should be viewed as supplemental to David's, not contradictory. All right, and do this one too, please, man.
And while we're passing these out, let me say, I should have said off the top of the bat, this ordinance, is one of the goals of our community work program and our comprehensive plan that we update every year. Items 10 and 11 on the community work program say this: conduct an evaluation of historic resources for preservation, restoration, and adaptive reuse. And then number 11 is adopt a historic preservation ordinance, making the county eligible to apply to the federal certified local government program. So this is really just a fulfillment of our community work program. So
David's correct, and that should have been done years ago. But we didn't. We didn't. We'd rather tear down a historic house and build Burger Doodle. That's the way it is. All right. Now, let's, if you would, look at the guidelines from DNR. And basically, this identifies how the steps they recommend in terms of drafting an ordinance. The other thing is the city's ordinance, and it's not bad. It covers a procedure for having it adopted, and it identifies certain definitions. One of the things we have not done is identified what a historic property is. And we have also not developed a procedure other than just setting it out in the ordinance for the National Trust properties. We have not developed a procedure by which somebody could come in and recommend a piece of property to be identified. One of the things that David's had to deal with in looking at the National Trust properties, the National Register properties, is the historic difference, if any, between the building and the land. All right? So, again, looking at this, what we've got to do is figure out a way to identify historic properties and have them administered and recognized. And what the outline that I've given you does is to make you the essentially the Historic Preservation Commission. And then, if y'all mess it up, it goes to the Board of Commissioners. And following the other guidelines, the VOC is required generally to adopt an ordinance for each property that goes on the historic list. Now, so let's put the National Register properties to the side. How are you going to know whether something is historic? You have a draft definition that comes from one of the documents you have there from DNR, which defines historic property as a building, structure, site, or object, including the adjacent area necessary for the proper appreciation or use thereof, deemed worthy of preservation and reason of value to Spalding County. All right. And then it gives certain criteria. It is an outstanding example of a structure representative of its era. It is one of the few remaining examples of a past historic architectural style. It is a place or structure associated with an event or persons of historic or cultural significance to Spalding County, state of Georgia, or the region. Or D, it is the site of natural or aesthetic interest that is continuing to contribute to the cultural or historical development and heritage of municipality. Now, thinking through what we've got, outside of the 3 properties that are plainly National Register properties. All right, some come to mind. The pre-Civil War house that is across from Ringgold Superette in Ringgold. Mount Zion Campground. The old store at the crossroads on Vaughn Road in McIntosh. There is a Confederate encampment that the Historic Society is responsible for, or yeah, I guess y'all do an upkeep, aren't you?
We own it.
You own it? Okay. All right. That's off of West McIntosh? All right. You have the historic minority church that's down here on Solomon. There's a good argument with all the restaurants she started that Louise's has historic value. All right. Now, so how do you make that decision? And then once you decide that, what happens? David's dealt with, and he will tell you this, the low-hanging fruit. All right. So what I'm recommending is that we add provisions in here to have a mechanism, if you'll turn to page 2 of this draft outline that I gave you. Your role would be to function as the Historic Review Committee. You would accept applications for designation. You would conduct preliminary review of the application for designation in compliance with the ordinance, and you would make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners. Then it'd get up to the Board of Commissioners, and they would review your recommendation and adopt a resolution to designate it as historic property. What are some of the criteria? And again, I just did it in an outline. National Register listing's obvious. Georgia Trust places in peril, that should be pretty obvious. Some type of historical event occurred there. All right, architectural style or design, the age of the structure. Is it tied to Native American stuff that occurred here? Does it have religious significance? Is it an archaeological site? And what difference should there be between commercial and residential properties? Then they would create an application, submit it to you, submit it to David first, it would come up to you, and you would conduct a preliminary review just like you review the planning rezonings and so forth that you have. Then it would go to VOC. Now, if you go on down, David has added in, one of the things that almost all these ordinances have, David has added in construction standards for historically designated properties in his 109. All right? And those are, what he's done is consistent with most standards that you would have. I'll give you credit for doing individual.
Well, it was Bill Bryant too. So.
Okay. These are standards.
Took a deep dive.
But what would happen is they would bring plans to David and his department to review. He would determine whether they are consistent with the historic. Now, after it's been designated as a historic now, he would determine whether or not those plans provide for renovation or repair or modification that's consistent with the historic designation. And he would then issue them a certificate of appropriateness to do it. That is comparable and the same as what the city's done. That gives David's office another permit to issue. Okay? One cannot have enough permits to issue in Spalding County.
That's right.
All right. Then, what David has added in relates to uses that would be around the historic property. And remember, we define it as either structure or area. All right. And then he would issue a permit, they could go out and do things. Now, I'm reminded of the Gordys who owned the Varsity. And I don't know whether y'all remember this story, but the city of Atlanta decided to do a historic preservation ordinance after they'd already torn everything down. And they put the Varsity on the historic list. And the Gordys took some exception to that and went and got a demo permit just to show the city they could do it. All right. Now, In that context, I think the city acted to pull them off, pull the varsity off the list. My last office in Atlanta was in the Hurt Building. The Hurt Building refused historic designation because it would hamper how they wanted to renovate the building. All right. So, just the fact that we have a historic ordinance, the fact that there is a historic designation does not mean that those buildings have to go on there. It doesn't mean the buildings are protected necessarily. It doesn't mean that the property owner's rights go away. But
Medical Arts Building is a good example too.
I'm sorry?
Medical Arts Building is a good example too.
Well, don't mention that one. That was where my wedding reception was. All right. Now, from that perspective, like I say, David's got the basics for now, but y'all have a lot of work to decide on these other things, whether you agree with this as a process. And if that's the case, for example, if you look at one of the sections that David has toward the end, which is to designate an appeal. All right, you would be under what I'm recommending, you would be, that's section 111. You would be a recommending body to BOC. If somebody wanted to take an appeal from that, it would go to Superior, under what I'm suggesting, it would go to Superior Court. Now, that said, they're gonna be on this, the Board of Commissioners' decision is gonna be subject to being overturned only in the event that they've acted arbitrarily or capriciously, which is a pretty high standard. So, but that would be where the appeal would go, and like I say, you're sitting here as in addition to your other duties, Historical Review Commission, the equivalent of it. And you will notice that we use the new text to define you after we get appendices B and C deleted and restated and approved. So what I've attempted to do is fill in from what David's given you on the already identified properties as to what would happen after that. Now, that's all, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. So, I would like to see what y'all need to hear from Kurt. You need to hear from the Hysterical Society representatives that are here, and look at their comments. Did y'all we have enough to pass out for y'all to get copies of it? Because I didn't bring it on an e-copy. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that additional information, supplemental data you provided there, Newton. I think all that is pertinent information that could be considered. I guess we're always willing to take on another duty if necessary. So, you know, certainly I know we've got several other things in the city and county that kind of act that way and are done that way. So I don't see a real issue with that. But now that we've heard that part, we will open the floor for anybody that would like to come for public comments. When you step to the mic, we'll just ask that you give us your name and address, and then we will hear you out and go from there.
All right.
Good to see you, Kirby.
Kirby Sisk. My address is 132 East College Street in Griffin. I'm the current and outgoing president of the Historical Society. And I guess I just want to bring 2 points up. I think, Newton, to your point about how do you determine what is historical and not, the Historical Society, our preservation committee started an effort almost a year and a half ago to create a way to recognize historic properties as well, and really in an effort to award the owner of the property a nice plaque that would designate their house as a historically significant property in the city of Griffin. It's not a historic registry designation at all, and it doesn't have a lot of specifics that would prevent the owner from doing one thing or another to the property. It just recognizes that they have a property that they've maintained and its historic significance to Griffin. And the way we do that is we have the person will fill out an application, the preservation committee reviews it, and they make a recommendation to our board to vote to award the recommendation or the award or not. And that's how we do it. It's not a cut and dry thing. We went down that path as well, and there's no real easy way to do it. We've got to have a group of people to review it based on some criteria, and that's what we do. And
Kirby, what are the criteria?
very similar to what you just read. We looked at some information that we got from the National Registry Program as well as the Georgia Trust as well, and it's architectural significance. It's just historical significance of what occurred on the property, what it's been to the community. And it's about a dozen different things that are very similar to what you just reviewed, that we just sort of look at their application based on those criteria and make a recommendation to the board to approve or not, them being added to that designation. So,
Would y'all
that's
have any problem with being the applicant to identify properties that y'all have had, to have them identified under this ordinance?
I don't see why we wouldn't. I'd have to discuss it with the board, but we already do that to a degree. We'd need to figure out how it would dovetail with exactly what you guys are proposing here, but we're already doing that to some degree. So, and it's not well, it's focused on the county and city as well, so it's the same sort of jurisdiction that you guys are looking at.
So Kirby, just to clarify, because when you started out there, I thought you said within the city, but you do have county
Oh, yes.
properties as well.
Yes, the Griffin Spalding Historical
Okay.
Society, right.
Now, do you think, based on the ones that have already been established and what you've laid out, that they're gonna feel like I say, that it definitely needs to be dovetailed in and kind of work together, but do you feel like that you're gonna have some that are gonna say, well, wait a minute, I don't know that I want to fall under some of these guidelines? Is that gonna present a potential possible problem?
It may. We have not run across that yet.
Okay.
I think we've given out around 30 or so of these plaques. So
Okay.
it's really more of an honor just to have it, just as recognition of the good job that people are doing preserving the property that they have. It doesn't have anything tied to it that would prevent them from making alterations to it or the like. So, and we made that conscious decision. We didn't really want to go down that path of providing anything that would prevent someone from doing anything in the future. It was more of a recognition and less of a constraint.
Right.
So,
But again, that's what, I mean, we've seen within a lot of these around. Most of the time when somebody goes after a house
Right.
like that in general,
right.
they have a heart for a historic house and they want it to continue to look like a historic house.
Now, you assume that the proposed owner has the right heart for it.
Right.
Right. So,
Right.
not always, but most of the time. The second point too I'd bring up is we've been working with Newtown Macon, which is a consultancy, to identify a historic district in Griffin as well. Before the tornadoes, we were considering two, and we've sort of pared back just to one, which is roughly the 3rd Ward district, based on the 4-ward map laid out in 1940 for the city. And again, we're trying to identify the criteria for what that would look like and what that means for people in the district. And also, eventually there'll be communication with the people in the district to see if they even want this and to get their input on how it would look as well. So that's the other thing that we've been doing from a preservation perspective.
And the 3rd Ward, and was the other one was actually
Well,
around
it would be considered 2nd Ward, but it's basically the northeast quadrant of that map, which would involve mainly, a lot of some of the mill villages and other areas there. But a lot of the tornado damage affected a lot of what they initially looked at. So rather than wait we just focused on one and not two at this point. So, but we'd still like to consider more than that down the road. So,
All right.
that's all I had.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
This is something I want to kind of pick your brain on if possible.
We'll take
And you know that I've been very interested in trying to salvage architectural items that were in homes that were being demolished or had been, damaged in the storm. And if you've been in my house, there's a plethora of things in there that have come from buildings that are no longer there. What can we do to encourage people, other than saying it's a good idea, before something is torn down or demolished, to look, inventory what's in there that might be worth keeping? I've got all of the metals that came out of the home that was torn down on the corner of College and Terracedale. That was the home of the guy who was the predecessor for I'm trying to think of the name of the building. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, man.
There we go. Thank you, Drew. And then I've got probably a whole mess of other stuff in there. And as y'all have known, I salvaged actually three of the brass thresholds from the Kimball House Hotel, which was demolished in Atlanta to build a parking lot. It's just a great country or what. But if you got any kind of suggestion as to how we might, you can't make people do things, but for God's sakes, we ought to at least encourage it.
Well, I know one thing, that there's a group in Savannah and another one in Macon, that they've created an architectural salvage business. So it's a commercial enterprise that people can approach if they do have a home that's just, for whatever reason, is going to be torn down. And they want to see if they have mantelpieces or flooring or doors or windows or whatnot that are worth salvaging. That's one way to do it. I know we've talked about, the Historical Society has limited funds. I'd love to have $1 million sitting in a kitty somewhere that we could create some sort of an architectural salvage aspect to what we do, but we just don't have the funds. You could have an offshoot of what we're talking about here with the historic program we do, for people to just let us know what they have. If we could have an understanding of what's in the property, we could reach out to the people in Macon or the one in Savannah, and there are probably others that might want to buy some of that before the property was torn down.
Yeah.
I think it's mainly a communication challenge more so than anything else.
I don't know how we would incorporate that in the ordinance, but at least it's something that I think we need to be thinking about.
I think so too. I think we'd probably be pretty amazed at what's in the bottom of the landfill over the last 50 years.
Thank you.
But I agree with you.
Oh, I know there's 10,000 glass insulators in there. Good
sure.
friend of mine dumped them all in there. He was heading up the, what was not Griffin Power, it was the Light and Water Department
Right,
at the time.
right. Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty other examples. Well, thank you. That's what I had. Any questions?
Kirby, I got a
Yes.
question. I had a zoning case that involved the Historic Review Committee in Macon, which is a subsidiary of the Macon-Bibb Planning Commission.
Okay.
And we fought over the design of the windows on the top of the door and the design of the front door that faced college. All right. What's your opinion on how far this should go? Now, that would be appropriate, I guess, but in a historic district. Have y'all, I don't see a historic district in the county.
No, I don't, what you're talking about there is a very, very involved, almost business-like organization.
Yeah.
That's a lot of effort to understand what to do with that, how to call out specific architectural items that are or are not historic, and then who polices that. Becomes a big challenge.
They did.
Right,
And did successfully.
yeah.
And I found it, I thought it was a little picky, okay?
Yeah.
If I wanna have a purple door and it's compatible with the house, I should be able to have a purple door,
Right.
okay? But they regulated color, they regulated style, they regulated windows in the door, the front door.
Jonesboro does.
But
They
you're completely open to do, you can do that.
You know, I know they do. I know they do. But
It just depends on how-
past a point,
Right.
Right.
okay,
I agree.
you know, but I don't see but I want you to follow through on what your thought is on whether there is a place for a historic district in the county, because I don't see one, and that, I omitted that from any additions to what
Right.
David already had in his ordinance.
Well, the Mill Village is the other of the two we originally considered. The Mill Village area was one we were trying to preserve.
I agree, and that's why we have, I don't know whether y'all are aware of this, we have a Mill Village overlay
I didn't know that.
that requires development consistent with the architectural style of the Mill Village.
Right,
And absolutely no one in the 5 or 6 years it's been active has come in to build.
right.
But you will have a case on that in about 45 minutes.
Yes,
Yeah, I know.
Stay tuned.
I know, we gotta, but they don't wanna be in the Mill Village.
You want to say something?
Register, we'll just say these people don't sell. So we've got Pittsburgh that's doing that huge thing across. And then architectural significance windows, like even the city, the way Hill Street is just a conglomerate of windows that have been jerked out. The most recent example is Steve
Doc Holiday.
Alma Hall. If you look at the one section, it's got the original wooden windows. And if you look at the second section, you've ripped them out and put those smaller vinyl replacement windows.
Well, I mean, things like that, you can specifically identify as an architectural requirement that they be matched what's there already. And it's just to what extent you move to enforce that. I know the Rosenwald School replaced a lot of the windows there, and that sort of kicked them out of a lot of financial incentives they could have used from a historical property. But again, I don't know, did they know who to go to ask, or I'm sure it's more expensive. And that's the other piece of this, is a lot of the historically accurate architectural items are gonna be vastly more expensive than what you can find commercially available.
Well, and they also require custom construction
Correct.
to replace.
Very much so.
And that's not really the intent now. Like Newton said, simply put, if we can't preserve the low-hanging fruit, then none of the rest is even worth talking about, so.
I kind of viewed what we're doing here as a really good starting point for that. And we're looking at these initial properties. And I think if once this gets established, maybe taking it the next step further to involve other folks to try to figure out what do you do beyond just that? How do you include architectural items like Frank had mentioned, and also how do you look at architectural elements of existing structures? That opens a different can, if you would.
All right, let me ask one final question,
Sure.
because, all right, on my office, significant work had to go into preparation of the information to put that house on the National Register. All right, that included architectural, history,
Yep.
so forth, all of the necessary requirements. It was a detailed form and a detailed process that then was submitted to, I guess, Department of Interior, or whoever has the National Register. How much detail is required for those of us who know Spalding County? How much detail is required for this board or a future board to be able to make a decision as to whether it is in fact a historical building or place?
Well, I can tell you what we do as a historical society. I mean, we want to know about it's sort of a light version of what you would do for the National Registry. I mean, we want to understand something about the historical events that took place. We want to have some photos and descriptions of the building itself, prior ownership, why it was built. A lot of things of that sort goes into determining whether or not it should be sort of allowed in our preservation aspect. But I actually helped a person here, Walker Hill. I helped Anita Hoffman with their application for the National Registry. And it's a book. I mean, it's a lot of work to get that done. And she applied, I think, 2 or 3 times. So it's a very, very detailed process to get on the National Registry.
Do y'all monitor, or are you assisting with people like Walker Hill to get a piece of?
No, I
Walker
just
Hill?
did that personally, because she just
Okay.
reached out about, getting someone to help do that, so. But, that could be a consulting business on its own. If you were to start something like that, you could seriously retire on that, I'm convinced. It's a lot of work.
Are y'all equipped to help identify them? You want me to quit picking on you and ask
No,
Drew?
no, that's okay. It's, I'd certainly welcome it. We already have sort of a process involved. And if we can, I guess the first thing we need to meet and talk about what we do to see how applicable it is and if it's valid. But, there's no sense in creating 2 parallel things if we can somehow work together on it. I think there's knowledge in that, so.
We appreciate that.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg. All right, anyone else like to speak? You're good, Drew?
I guess I'll say what, like I'm gonna say something.
Well, come on up and give your name and address.
Drew Payne, 434 East College. I think this is great that y'all are doing this in any way that we can. Kirby is the outgoing president, and I'm the incoming president in August. So I guess if you do identify that you'll be working more with me, because Kirby's flying the coop and going to New Zealand, England, or wherever he's going. But the thing that I thought about, as Newton's saying, when you're trying to identify what would be a historic building? What would you recommend? Because you can't tell anyone what they can and can't do if it's not on the register already. What would you recommend that they do? Other cities and counties have these things in place, and have we tried just looking at what someone else does? Like, I know I'm very close with the person that that's the executive director of Historic Columbus, and I was asking her what they do to aid Muskogee County and Columbus. She said, well, everything is on the website, and you know, we only have one. We have the Main Street down here that has a designation. But she said in Columbus, if you buy one of those buildings, that they just refer you to the website, and it's all on there, what they recommend, and she said, as far as that goes, she said, I don't care if y'all just look at it and copy it. So I don't know if y'all have thought about just looking at what someone else does, and then maybe you won't have to recreate the will and do that. So that was my 2 cents worth, and I wanted to thank y'all for what you're doing.
Thank you, Drew.
Yeah, thank you.
Drew, what I was looking at for the stuff that goes beyond what David's already done, was try to have a procedure that was as compatible as what's in the Griffin ordinance as is possible. Like I say, that's a pretty good ordinance. And they do set up a review board. Aren't you on that?
I was for a while. I know that we have representatives from the Historical Society on there.
All right, and then some type of, that you go through a process, since you were on that board, can you give them a little idea of how that process worked?
So I
How
guess
often did y'all have to meet? Because like the planning commission in the city doesn't meet often.
it was maybe once a month. I guess the good thing is that the city has the board. The frustration was that there was nothing like the city of Columbus has that gives the person that purchases the building a guideline or something that says, all right, if you work within this threshold, what you're doing will become approved. I guess the frustrating part was it was kind of willy-nilly. And take, for example, Thelma that did the Griffin Hotel. My big deal, obviously, are windows. Windows are the eyes of the building. And if you look down, I use Hill Street as an example because that's one that we're all familiar with. There's some good examples and some really bad examples. And she had no guidance on what to do. So when she came before this board, I mean, I personally didn't like the ones that she chose, but Drew doesn't rule the world, and she was restoring a building that probably cost her umpteen, blah, 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 and she had already purchased them, not knowing that she couldn't. So if we did a route that there was some guidance on our website, that just saying, well, these are some things that we'll automatically approve, if that makes sense. And that seems to be what some other municipalities does. So, and that's just a suggestion, but it might make it easier for people that are trying to restore a building or have a building that's historically designated or one that they wanted to bring for this program. So, does that answer your question? Or?
Well, and I can say too, from my Downtown Development Authority side and what we deal with, because HPC comes in, they'll approve something that somebody's wanting to do, a developer's wanting to do, and then what we end up sometimes with is not what was approved and doesn't match up. So then, then you have to get code enforcement and everything else involved. So it's an ordeal. You're going to always have somebody wanting to get around something or cheat the system, but at least you have a guideline, and I really like what you're saying about having, the basic details already there to provide people with the information. That way they can't just say, well, I didn't know, because you can say, well, it's right there on the website and we pointed you in that direction to start with.
And it makes it, in my opinion, easier. That meeting about the Griffin Hotel was one of the most stressful meetings I have ever attended in my work career and my personal career. And I thought to myself, if it had just had some basic suggestions or guidelines on our city website somewhere, all that would have been avoided.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
But, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I guess jumping in, watching the time, and gosh, good comments. And
Got one more, I think.
Oh, okay, one more.
Bill, please speak into the mic
Yeah, I'm sorry.
so
I
that the
always forget
audience
that. I always
can hear
forget
you.
that.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
All right.
Thanks for allowing the time. My name's Kirk Feldstuhl, 1105 West Peachtree Street in Atlanta with the law firm of Smith, Gambrell, and Russell, here on behalf of one of the property owners for this draft ordinance, the McElroys. And I guess what I would say as kind of a starting point is that certainly there is value to the preservation of historic homes. Nobody disputes that. We don't dispute that. In fact, so the home that is on our property is the historic Gaysert home, right? And there is no dispute that we want to preserve that as a historic home. We put money into it, kept it, it looks very nice, it's well maintained, and the intention has always been to preserve. It's been stated from the outset. What I think Mr. Galloway had introduced was a discussion about a historic preservation ordinance that has a process associated with it for designation of homes or districts, whatever the case may be. That's not what this ordinance is that's before you. So, and I'm going to read from just a couple of lines from the historic, let me sort of get to the end of the book here, and then we can kind of move forward. Our hope and our recommendation is that this ordinance not go forward as proposed, that we wait, have more discussion, or not put it on at all in the current form that it's in. In the DNR regulations for the adoption of a historic preservation ordinance, step 10, holding public hearings, it says a public hearing should be scheduled for comments on recommended historic property or historic designations. At the end of that second paragraph, it says, also consider holding 2 public hearings, as there will undoubtedly be questions that come up that you can't answer right away, but should address. These are Mr. Galloway's regulations he handed out. And then it lists as requirements for a public hearing, notice of the hearing must be published 3 times in a local newspaper. Written notice must be mailed to all owners and occupants within the proposed district, or in this case, it would be each home is its own district. And notices must be published or mailed 10 to 20 days before the hearing. The whole purpose of that is because there are a lot of interests at stake. In our case, we own the property. And this is really not a historic building preservation ordinance. It's called out as a historic property preservation ordinance. And I want to point out, our property is not historic by no means. It is on the National Register for the building. But if you read the registry, it talks about the character and the architecture of the building itself. The property has no historic significance at all. It's been divided and used since the 1850s when the home was built. So it's really a misnomer to classify this as and think that we're here to talk about the historic building. We're not. We're talking about the property in that ordinance. And in fact, if you talk about the way the ordinance is designed to be drafted according to DNR, there would be, every time that you get a draft ordinance, you would send that to the property owners for comment. Well, that never happened here. What happened is that before we wanted the property rezoned, the front portion of the McElroy property, which is 80 acres, we wanted 12 acres. We're looking to get it rezoned to C1. Okay, it didn't include the historic property. We intended to divide that. Well, just when we asked for the application be placed before this planning commission, what ends up happening is you get this historic preservation ordinance draft. And the ordinance, the way it's drafted, has no other purpose than to try to stop the development. It's not designed to preserve the building. And I want to show you a couple of those examples, if I may approach.
Thank you.
The way the ordinance was drafted, it required that there be, if you want to divide the property, remember this is on 80 acres, you have to have a minimum of 10 acres around the building that's to be preserved, and it has to be 300 feet from the property line. Well, that's specifically designed to stop this rezoning. The property line would then go right through the proposed development. That's what the intention was. Now, they've made some changes, it sounds like, but we haven't seen them, to reduce it to 5 acres from 10.
200 feet.
Right, exactly. Which coincidentally occurs right after the zoning is denied, right? So the zoning remains in place until the zoning is denied, and then the changes get made. So there's about 4 points that I want to make. One of which is that this is not about preserving the buildings. This is drafted to stop the development. And most of the ordinance talks about the property, which is not historic. The second is that in the entire county, this ordinance is drafted as a discussion about 3 specific properties. The whole county. So we can talk about the low-hanging fruit, but what it's really doing is targeting 3 specific properties. Now I want to talk about those sections of the ordinance that we think both impact our property and were called out to stop the zoning. If you look at section 106, it restricts permitted uses on the property. And if you look at the way it says, it says, the following restrictions on uses apply to all designated properties regardless of the current zoning. So this ordinance starts out as a way to restrict the uses on the property, which is the opposite of what should happen with a historic building preservation. Because what happens with historic buildings is they have trouble generating their own revenue, and we're restricting the uses of the property regardless of the zoning. They also allow that there can be additional zonings, but they are only going to be agricultural tourism, that's section F of 106, neighborhood commercial, and office. Significantly, it leaves out C1, which is what we had applied for. And again, there should not be a restriction on a historic property in terms of the zoning. It should be encouraging uses, not restricting them, because these properties are hard to maintain. The next thing I want to talk about is the division of property, section 107. And that's where apparently there were some changes made to reduce from 10 acres to 5 acres, 300 feet to 250 feet. But what I want to show you,
Kirk, I don't want to interrupt you, but I will tell you those changes were given to David as recommendations, I believe, from members of the Planning Commission that predated the hearing last week.
I get it, that would be good if we'd have gotten them.
Right?
It would have
Okay,
been,
gotcha.
just wonderful if we'd have been able to get them. So again, if I may approach. remember, there were 3 properties designated. Old Smokehouse, Double Cabins, and Gaser. Those are the 3. There was a 10-acre requirement with a 300-foot from the property if you divide them. If you look at what I just handed out, which is the Smokehouse property, it's 7 acres to start with. So when we ask for this zoning application to be placed on, we get the 10 acres minimum. One of the 3 isn't even 10 acres. There was also a 300-foot requirement, and this same property, if you look at the distances, they are 191, 139, and 233 feet. So this property wouldn't even have application to those requirements that were adopted. It's ours that was being singled out. It has now been reduced to 5 feet and 250 feet, which I understand.
Of acres and 200 feet.
That's
200 feet, I'm sorry. But there's no basis for it. Right now, if we were to divide this property, it would have to be 3 acres. It's in an agricultural district. There's no decision-making that goes into maintaining this property at 5 versus 3. And to further cause a problem for us, it's in the middle of our 70 acres. So it becomes more difficult to develop the property. There's just not a basis when you're talking about trying to preserve a home to have you carve out extra property. And all of these great discussions by the Preservation Society, those were great discussions related to the building, not how big the property should be. The last thing I want to talk to you about is this issue of adjacent properties. The first one is in section 108 that adds an additional buffer of 25 feet. Ordinarily, it would be 15 feet. So if you go back to the site plan that I had given you, and it shows the property line going right through the building, well, add another 25 feet. And it starts getting into the middle and the other side of the building. That additional 25 feet is now starting to regulate adjacent properties really without any basis. The last part of this is in section 109, where there are architectural standards. I don't know if those have changed. At the time, the architectural standards that were adopted really and remember, these architectural standards in the draft ordinance were not for the building, they're for adjacent properties. And not only are they for adjacent properties, they're for non-residential properties. So if you don't mind, I would like to approach one more time. This will be the last.
Okay, we really have to, we got another meeting at 6 o'clock, so you got a few minutes.
You need to get cracking.
2 minutes, all we got left.
This is the other home, double cabin. And if you look at this is what's adjacent to double cabin. It is mobile homes, right? And whether you like mobile homes or don't like mobile homes or what they look like, their architecture is not similar to the home. So this is specifically these architectural standards, which really started in our zoning application and then were transferred, were designed to stop a commercial project. It only relates to commercial property. So for these reasons, we would ask that you not move this forward until there's been some additional discussion. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much. Any further comments from you fellows?
Well, I'll comment some other time because we've
Okay.
got 2 minutes and I probably need to take a break.
Okay, anything from you all? before?
Not for me.
Okay, with that, we will, ask for a motion to adjourn this.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. All in favor? We are closed out.